Are you struggling to configure Bitbucket pipelines with Docker to connect to AWS? You're not alone. Many developers face this challenge, and today we're going to break it down step by step. I totally get it. Setting up deployment pipelines can be tricky, especially when you're trying to push images to Amazon's image repository instead of Docker Hub. It's frustrating when things don't work as expected. Here's the specific situation we're addressing. One user asked how to set up Bitbucket pipelines to deploy to Amazon ECS. They followed the instructions but encountered an error stating no basic auth credentials. Sound familiar? Let's dive into this together. So what could be causing this issue? The AWS CLI uses a provider chain to look for credentials in various places, including environment variables and local configuration files. If it's not recognizing your variables, we need to troubleshoot that. And stick around. I have a crucial tip at the end that will help you avoid this issue in the future. To begin resolving the user's issue, we need to ensure that the AWS credentials are correctly configured in the Bitbucket pipeline. The user has already set the AWS access key and secret key in the Bitbucket parameters, which is a good start. Next, the user should modify the pipeline configuration to explicitly set the AWS credentials before running the Docker login command. This can help ensure that the credentials are recognized. Now, let's focus on the Docker login command. The user should ensure that the command is correctly formatted to authenticate with the Amazon Elastic Container Registry. Finally, the user should test the pipeline after making these changes. This will help confirm whether the adjustments to the credentials and login command resolve the authentication issue. Fun fact, did you know that AWS ECR was launched in 2015? It's come a long way since then, making container management easier for developers everywhere. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative method for building and pushing Docker images to AWS ECR is suggested. This approach does not require environment variables. Instead, it uses the Amazon AWS CLI Docker image and an OIDC role for authentication. In the pipeline, the user logs into ECR using the AWS CLI command to get a login password, builds the Docker image, and then pushes it to ECR. Remember to update the role ARN to match your IAM role with the necessary permissions. Now, let's dive into a different answer from another user. An alternative solution provided by another user suggests a different approach to configuring Bitbucket pipelines with Docker for AWS. They recommend creating a custom pipeline in your Bitbucket pipeline.yml file. Start by setting up the necessary environment variables, including the image location and build context. Then, install the AWS CLI and copy your deployment keys from an S3 bucket. After that, use SSH to clone your repository. Finally, build and push your Docker image to Amazon ECR, passing your AWS credentials as build arguments. That's the end of that answer. Let's see another perspective. An alternative solution comes from a user who faced a similar issue. They found that the problem was due to using an outdated version of the AWS CLI. Their recommendation is to use a Docker image that includes a more recent version of the AWS CLI, specifically the Link Mobility/Maven Aikgela image. They also suggest making small changes to your Bitbucket pipeline configuration. Specifically, you should use the command eval.ecr get login, no include email, region AWS default region to authenticate with AWS ECR. Here's the tip I promised. Always validate your environment variables and configurations before running your pipeline. This simple step can save you a lot of headaches. And there you have it. With these steps, you should be able to configure your Bitbucket pipelines successfully. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more tips and tricks on deployment and cloud services.